Hello everyone. Today I'm going to present this popular science presentation of the PhD work that was done. The title is Pressure Coupled, the Representative Interactive Linear Eddy Model for Internal Combustion Engine Simulations. So today I'm trying to, let's say, explain my research in easy words so the general public can understand. The presentation would go as the following. We start with a quick background, an explanation of the approach, and then we're gonna finish with the conclusion. So a very important thing to understand is that combustion of hydrocarbons will always produce CO2. Either if it is the case of complete combustion, such as if we're going to burn a hydrocarbon fuel with oxygen, it will give us CO2 and water. And in case of incomplete combustion of hydrocarbons with oxygen, it will also give us CO2 and water. But in addition to that, we will have also some other species such as carbon monoxide, NOx, OH, and etc. Another important thing to understand is that CO2 actually is not always bad for the environment. It is, in fact, necessary for a correct functioning of our planet, since it helps us maintain appropriate temperature levels. So a consequence of combustion in general is or let's say an increase in combustion is the high levels of CO2 emissions that start to produce. And this essentially means that the temperature of the planet will increase. So it's basically like cooking the planet. In addition to other types of emissions that are harmful for both the environment and for the health of human beings. And finally, the other aspect is actually the depletion of resources, since if we continue to just burn hydrocarbon fuels, at some point the oil will run out, and then we will be forced to find another way to transport ourselves. So it's better to be independent from hydrocarbon fuels as early as possible before we get into this crisis. So normally the political sentiment starts to change regarding the combustion of hydrocarbon fuels with internal combustion engines, and their reaction was to increase the let's say to make the emission legislations more stringent, so more difficult. We have two graphs here that represent different levels of emission legislation. Here it's the Euro legislation for both gasoline and diesel, and we can see that the newer the emission legislation, the more or the less allowed emissions are. So the concentration of emissions decrease with the increase in or with every new presented emission legislation. And this, of course, in order for the automotive industry to cooperate or to respect these emissions legislations, they need to, let's say, increase the complexity of their exhaust after treatment system, which is also called as EATS. So of course, if you increase the cost of your after treatment system of your car, the cost will also increase, which means that the cost of the vehicle will also increase. So therefore, some, let's say, OEMs, they decided to actually stop using the internal combustion engine and jump to other technologies such as electric motor and the fuel cells, battery stacks. But that's, in my opinion, it's not the perfect or the best solution, because we need to depend on, we still depend on the internal combustion engine, because it will help us, it will help us to it will help other technologies to mature, which means that we need to continue optimizing our internal combustion engine by using different combustion technologies and different modeling capabilities. And as I said before, the internal combustion engine will actually help and drive the maturation process of other technologies. So how do we do this kind of work, this improvement of internal combustion engines? So you do that by presenting new technologies such as a duct fuel injection, different type or different piston geometries. You can also introduce different kind of ignition technologies such as plasma ignition. You can also operate in different modes and regimes of combustion. You can use like stratified combustion, where the combustible mixture is distributed differently inside the combustion chamber. You can also use a dual fuel combustion, where you are actually injecting two types or two fuels inside of your chamber. So one pilot fuel and one main fuel. Here, for example, in this picture, we see that we have diesel that will help into igniting the natural gas because it's hard to ignite. And you can also use low temperature combustion that will help into reducing, let's say, bad emissions or reducing emissions such as NOx that are produced in high temperature environments. You can also use different fuels, of course, such as electric fuels, compressed natural gas, hydrogen, other types of alternative fuels that are currently being developed, such as ammonia or methanol or whatever. So there is actually no size fit all when it comes to turbulence modeling, or sorry, turbulence combustion modeling. So instead, what we do is we actually use different models that are simulated or that are developed for different cases. So in this scenario, we're using a model that is called a linear eddy model. So linear eddy model here, linear entire means that we are using only one line. So it's a one-dimensional model. Eddy, eddies are actually these kind of vortices that you can see in different scenarios when you are mixing your coffee with sugar, or when you have this kind of movements in the water or in smoke. Turbulence actually exists everywhere, all around us. And when we say model, that simply means a computational model, because you can also do investigation of combustion processes in experimental facilities. But in this situation, we are using a computational model to investigate combustion. So how do we do this turbulence combustion modeling? So in LEM, or in the linear eddy model, we want to simulate turbulence on a one-dimensional line instead of a three-dimensional line. And we also want to simulate all sizes of turbulent vortices. So as you can see here in this moving picture, you will have large large eddies or large vortices at the start of the let's say the start of the flow around here, and then the more you develop, the smaller the eddies will start to be, and that is also an effect of so the energy level starts to move from let's say this region to this region, and then you will start to have a smaller turbulence, smaller turbulence sizes. And another aspect is that we want to accurately predict emissions, and that you improve by or you increase the predictability of your emissions by when you better capture the interaction between turbulence and chemistry. So let's see. Let's have a look at the influence of turbulence and the chemistry on each other. So if we have a look here, and we start from the turbulence. If we increase turbulence on the flame, At a certain level, okay, we start to see that we have a lift-off, which means the flame being detached from the nozzle, as you can see in this image here. But of course, even if you, let's say, remember, I mean, if you just quickly blow on a flame, it will disappear, and that's what we call flame blow off. So the effects of turbulence, of high turbulence on chemistry, it simply means that it will kill the flame, kill the chemical reactions. And on the other way, you also have chemistry influencing turbulence by generating more turbulence. So here, for example, we can, this image represents turbulence that is generated from the buoyancy effects of the flame. So yeah, there is an interaction between turbulence and chemistry, and in order to accurately simulate your combustion process, you need to capture these effects. And therefore, you need a model that is able to capture these effects. So again, as I previously mentioned, we are using a model that is called the linear eddy model. So some of the characteristics or the techniques that this model is using is that so it is a spherical line. So it's two cones that are connected through let's say points, and that point is where we have our injection nozzle, where we'll be injecting fuel. And then we distribute this line into small cells. And in each cell, there will be chemical reactions that are solved based on, let's say, the composition that you have in that cell. So if you have fuel and oxygen with appropriate levels of temperature and pressure, then you can have autoignition, for example. So another aspect is that we are also solving or simulating diffusion and heat conduction. So the heat is also able to travel across the line, and also the diffusion of species. So species can also travel across the line. And this interaction between the species and the heat also helps also influences the combustion process. And finally, turbulence, of course, that's what we were talking about. So turbulence here in this scenario, since it is a one-dimensional line and turbulence is a 3D phenomena, so these vortices, they have a 3D shape. On a one-dimensional line, we are unable to simulate a 3D phenomena, which means that we need to translate it into a one-dimensional type of vortice. And that vortex is what we call a triplet map. So triplet mapping is simply implementing turbulence on a one-dimensional line. So a quick discussion or a quick description of turbulence modeling here, how it is done. So we start from a computational fluid dynamic mesh. So we take our geometry, we mesh it, which means we discretize it. While we discretize it, we do that in order to solve the equations of flow, energy, and continuity. So the equations that will describe the distribution of velocity, density, and temperature. And then, so once we advance these processes and can also solve turbulence there, then we send some representative parameters to our linear eddy model line where turbulence and combustion will interact with each other, and then it will give us a description of how the flame looks like, and that we will send back to the CFD. So instead of solving chemistry in each CFD cell, that's going to be quite a lot, we solve chemistry and turbulence on a one-dimensional line, and it has less cells. The coupling can be done either via pressure or volume, and the representation can be done either with a standalone line or with the CFD feedback, so as I explained here. So this is a quick video that shows how turbulence combustion develops on a one-dimensional line. So the red line represents the temperature field, so combustion. The small vibrations represent turbulence, and the other colors that you see below. So green, for example, represents the fuel that is being injected, and the blue line represents an intermediate species that's appears and then disappears due to um, yeah, to its progress. Another thing that we introduced in this work is to actually, since the one-dimensional line is quite limited in space, the data that we get from advancing one line is actually limited. So what we decided to do is that we are advancing multiple lines in parallel, just so we can, let's say, capture different realities. So as you can see here, if you advance one line, you can look at the right side and see how the, let's say, the solution looks like. But if you advance multiple lines in parallel, each line will be capturing a different, let's say, different reality, and then you can gather different data from different realities, and then you can complete the solution here much better. And here are some results. These are some CFD pictures of the results of using LEM. So on the left side here, it's a heavy duty case, both for a part load and a full load. The part load is on the left and the full load is on the right. You can also have, it was also simulated, or RILEM simulated a low compression ratio case with let's say, a different probability density function for the progress of the flame, with two different definitions of this parameter, either with an oxygen or with the formation enthalpy here. So it was also able to predict that. And finally, we were also able to describe a duct on the LEM line. So we actually put a duct on the 1D line, then we simulated the turbulent combustion on it, and then we were able to map that back to a CFD. And as you can see here, this was the flame developing after the duct. So as a general conclusion, what was done in this work is to upgrade the RILEM model from a volume-based system to a pressure-based system. We were able to introduce multiple LEM lines to capture different statistics. And finally, we were also able to manipulate the flexibility of the LEM line. Since it is represented in physical space, we were able to manipulate this feature to incorporate, let's say, different geometries and their effects. So thank you for your attention.